All right, so welcome to the Saturday morning call. It's Saturday morning in Thailand. Uh, this is our first call on Discord. So welcome everybody. I'm glad that you're here. Um, who is recording Craig? What does that
That's
mean?
yeah, that's the audio. That's uh, that's the audio recorder.
All right. Yes. So this being our first call, we've got a request for the topic of the Satipatthana. And at the beginning of the Satipatthana Sutta, number 10 in the Majjhima Nikaya, and also the Greater Satipatthana, which is in the Digha Nikaya, I think number 22, it mentions um, that the direct path. Now, that's actually a good translation. Santikaro translated Achan Bhikkhu Buddhadasa to use the word shortcut. And originally I questioned that until I found out that, in the Thai language, that's exactly what it means, the shortcut. And that we can think of that in the sense of a triangle where you have point A, point B, and point C, and that the hypotenuse goes from A to C directly, and that the indirect method would go from A to B and then from B to C, which is a long way around. But the Buddha is talking about going directly, all right? Um, which would be then go directly to jail, do not pass go, if you're playing Monopoly. But in this context, going directly means that we bypass doing a lot of stuff that would normally be done. And we can say that what we're bypassing is actually not the teachings of the Buddha. That when we're going directly to the actual teachings of the Buddha. Um, and that even though that this is mentioned in the Satipatthana Sutta, there is more to it than just the Satipatthana, that we can say that the Satipatthana is only part of the teachings of the Buddha. So let's talk about the Satipatthana first, and then we'll show how it fits in. First off, the Satipatthana means the four foundations of mindfulness. Patthana actually has the word foot, as in uh, the English, we have the word pedal and pedestal. So that's why it's called the foundations of mindfulness. Now, um, these four items, which are the foundation, actually comes originally from ancient wisdom of the four elements. The four elements being hard, liquid, uh, temperature or fire, and then wind or air, or another way of looking at it would be smoke, in the sense of the smoke is what happens when we are on fire. And so, and by the way, the hotter the fire, the better the fire, the less smoke there is. So, these four elements then are associated with the hard, which is the body, the liquid is the feelings, the fire itself is mind. That in fact, Ajahn Tanisaro wrote a book, um, Mind Like Fire Unbound. And then the fourth one is the wind or the air that we normally associate with several aspects. One of them would be anicca. Everything is flux, everything is fluid, everything is moving constantly. And we can also think of it as uh, what's happening actually in the mind. That in fact, we can take a distinction here between the mind itself, which we would also refer to as the states of mind, or what the mind is inclining or leaning towards. And then we can think of the wind element as actually the contents of the mind that flipper in and out. That could be thought. Now, the word thought here actually is, let us say, more incorporate, broader than just discursive thoughts or words that we say to ourselves. We can also have a thought that's an image. We can have a thought that would be a sensation when we have an itch. Whatever that we're actually paying attention to, or whatever is happening in this thought moment. And the moments keep moving very rapidly. And so a thought then would be, in fact, you could say that a discursive thought actually requires a number of thought moments, with each word as being a thought moment. But the mind works fairly fast. It works in a shorthand kind of way, and that you can have a thought, but expressing that thought in words takes a whole lot more putting together, a whole lot more thought than just the original little thought. So when we use the word thought, we're talking about something much broader and much faster than discursive thought, which means basically talking to ourselves. So with these four items of the four foundations of mindfulness, by paying attention to those things is the direct method taking us to the goal of no goal, as opposed to all the things that we could be paying attention to that have wound up being objects of meditation. For instance, Nostradamus used a bowl of water. The New Agers are using crystals. Historically, there has been fire meditations of gazing at a fire. Now, gazing at a fire will actually, that's a very fast way of going into a trance-like state. The story would be is that a group of people, say the Boy Scouts or a Christian group or people out camping, and they're sitting around singing with a guitar, Kumbaya or something like that. And then one person starts looking at the fire, and then everybody starts looking at the fire, and everything goes silent, and everybody is now focused on or absorbed by the fire. However, when they come back out of that, they haven't changed a thing. They're still exactly the way that they were. So you could say then that these kind of meditations that are focused on distant objects. Another example would be to focus on a mountaintop or some item at a distance. And that these are called meditations. But the one thing that is kind of unique about the Buddha is that he took all of the meditations that were done before him that normally had to do with outside objects and turned them to the inside. So when we're talking about the body, we're talking about the body from the inside rather than the outside. But you could also say the inside going to the outside. An example of what I'm talking about on the outside merely is someone standing in front of a mirror shaving or putting on makeup or something, and they're paying attention to the outside of the body. But when we're practicing correctly, we're actually more paying attention to what the body is going on the inside, basically how the body feels, what sensations are occurring, etc., like that. And so the feelings would be to start paying attention to the way that the body operates chemically. So we can have, there's a whole lot of chemicals that we know about today that the Buddha didn't know about, that we can name, but that the Buddha knew them experientially. He experimented looking at the inside to notice the effects of what we now call things like dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, cortisol, and many of these other bodily things that affect the way that the body actually feels. You can also put it more specifically in the sense that when we have dopamine, that means that we're experiencing some sort of pleasure, which means that we like stuff. And that when we experience adrenaline, that means kind of a flight or fright or freeze situation, which we could say would then be ill will. And then there is a combination of those that, in fact, both of them can be happening at the same time, or there can be a lack of that stuff, and that would be the third feeling. Now, in the suttas, it talks about that third feeling as sukha asukha, which actually means kind of both of them. But what it winds up being is the feeling of being confused. We don't know whether we like it or not. We don't know whether we understand it or not. And that we don't like being in a state of confusion. And so that confusion state almost always drops right into ill will anyway, in the sense that we don't like not knowing. So this is the Satipatthana. And now let's see how it kind of fits in with the four foundations of mindfulness. Right now, I'm checking the screen, seeing if I can find a place where it shows how we're doing here. Mikey, is there a place on the OBS where it shows how long this recording has been going on?
Yeah, in the bottom right next to the red circle.
I'm not seeing it. It says 30 frames a second, and the CPU is 6%.
It's not recording on your end.
Hmm.
It's okay. I've got a recording.
All right. So mine is not recording now. We'll have to figure that out. All right. So now that we've talked about the Satipatthana, let's go and start talking about how the Satipatthana actually fits in to the teaching of the Buddha, the actual teachings. But before we do, let's ask folks for questions. Does anybody have a question about what we've talked about so far? Mr. Ben, you're okay with this? All right. How about you, Eddie? You have any questions so far?
Kind of came in a little late. Satipatthana is all I know we're talking about, so I'm good.
Okay. All right. So, the direct method means going straight without doing side stuff. So let's talk about going straight to what? We can say that we're going straight to the actual teachings of the Buddha. Now, there are several suttas that talk about what he teaches. He mentions one, actually, there's four places where he says it in this phrase, both formerly and now, I teach only one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha. Now, there's some famous monk who actually questions that. He's digging into the Pali and trying to figure out a way that the Buddha taught other than that. But there is also suttas, I think is number 63 in the Majjhima Nikaya, where he's very specific about what he does teach and what he doesn't teach. He doesn't teach about the world in the sense of how old it is, or whether it's going to last and last, or whether it's going to terminate, or any of the other kinds of things that, by the way, the Christians and the atheists, they really care about. They really want to know about big bangs and all of this kind of stuff. But guess what? None of that stuff actually is relevant to us now. That was a long time ago, and none of us were there, so we don't have to worry about it. Or where the end of the world comes is that we don't have to worry about that because it's so far into the future. Or it might happen before this call is ended. Who knows? But more importantly than who knows is who cares. That stuff is not relevant at all. And so all of the stuff about the past and the future, the Buddha most specifically says that he does not make a comment about. What he does make a comment about is the origins of dukkha. This is dukkha. This is the cause of dukkha. This is, in fact, the end of dukkha. And there is a method that one can practice to get to the end of dukkha. Now, dukkha is actually better translated as disappointment, dissatisfaction, and the common translation of dukkha is suffering. But we have tiny little dissatisfactions working in and out on a regular basis. But I would say right now, offhand, that probably nobody on this group would actually be in a state of suffering. There's nobody turning their microphone on to groan or to yell or anything like that. And so we can say that it's not a big suffering. And so the word suffering actually doesn't apply to dukkha. But that's what the original translators used, and that got into the lexicons and the Pali dictionaries. And so even the most modern translators continue to make the mistake of translating dukkha into the word suffering. But I caution you, we've got a whole lot more work to do, happy work, by looking at the little stuff, not waiting around for something big to happen. That in fact the problem is that when there's only little stuff around, we make something big out of it. And so if we just leave it at the little stuff, we can notice it as it passes by. So dukkha actually is one of the most important things, because if we can see it, we can change it. And if we can't see it, we can't change it. This actually would be what insight really is. The insight into, is this thought wholesome or unwholesome? Is this thought right now, is it hindering us from feeling a really joyful state, the kind of way that you would want to feel? Or is this thought hindering us, obstructing us from feeling the way that we want to feel? So let's look at the dukkha in the sense of, as soon as we can make discernment, as soon as we can figure out what this is, then we can change it immediately, going immediately from dukkha to dukkha nirodha, which means to stop the dukkha, which means moving immediately from the first noble truth to the third noble truth. Now, the second noble truth and the fourth noble truth are actually the bulk of what the Buddha teaches. But this one point about what dukkha is, that's the linchpin. That's the important thing, that we have to be able to look and to see what is wholesome and not wholesome. And so that's why the Buddha talks about it as coming first. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the Eightfold Path. So let's talk about now the second noble truth. The second noble truth is the reasons or the cause of dukkha. And that one important point that it becomes really, really obvious is that the source of dukkha is also something that comes from within us. It comes within our body, our mind, our feelings, and our thoughts and our attitudes. It does not come from the outside. A very quick example of that would be in 2004, there was a huge tsunami. That tsunami happened because of some kind of earthquake that happened in the Indian Ocean. And by the time that the water hit Phuket, it drowned a whole bunch of mostly tourists, Westerners, who were there on the beach because they weren't paying attention to what was happening. Now, the funny part of the story is that the elephants that were on that island, they all became agitated and they broke out of their pens, and the men chased them up into the hills. Meanwhile, part of the story is that there was a guy that had his elephant up in the hills, taking it back down to the camp, and the elephant wouldn't go, and that the pathway was such that the other elephants met him, and he was very surprised that all the elephants were charging up, then followed by all the manut, all the men who were chasing their elephants. Now, here's the point. The elephants knew long in advance of that tsunami. How did they know? How did they know that the tsunami was coming? So if you can take that, then you can see then that all of those people who were enjoying the beach when they got drowned by that tsunami wasn't because the tsunami itself was dukkha. It's their lack of attention. They didn't know because they weren't paying attention, but the elephants could feel that tsunami coming, so they were paying attention to it. So, if we can understand the second noble truth in the sense that the dukkha is not there from the outside, the dukkha is there mostly because we're ignorant of what's going on, often even delusional, in the sense that we don't know what's going on because we think something else is going on and we're not even paying attention to what's actually going on. We're too busy making up stories about what's going on. So, if we can understand the second noble truth is something that's very sophisticated, we can think of it in the sense of understanding how one's own mind works. How you can see what's really going on is because almost everything that is going on is within the mind, not on the outside. And so this story of the elephants is a good indication for you to begin to see that we need to pay attention to the sensory input, the thoughts, all of this kind of stuff, rather than thinking it's the tsunami or it's something on the outside that's causing the dukkha. Recognize that what it is that we're not paying attention to what is happening, and that's the cause of the dukkha, is that we're ignorant to what's happening. So, there is a lot of teachings that are associated with the second noble truth, and one of them is what is called the five aggregates, because the five aggregates, in fact, the five aggregates are very similar, very close to the Satipatthana. There's just a small little change, and that is that the Satipatthana has 4 items, and that the five aggregates are broken into 5. They're broken into 5 because we take the first 3 would be the body, the feelings, and the mind, and the mind objects. And so we're going to break that out into 5 groups. We're keeping the feelings and the body, but taking the mind and breaking it into 3 groups. And that 3 groups is the way that our memory systems work, our perceptions of what's coming in as input, and the perceptions are using the the memory system. But the main teaching of the five aggregates is that in no case are any of them actually who we are. They're not me. They're just focused on features. Like, for instance, the body is just the body. Many people in the West confuse the body with the self in the sense of I am the body. And look at the number of industries that we have going on that cater to that. One of them is, the clothing industry, the fashion industry, the shoes and the handbags, and all kinds of items that are sold. Lipstick, for instance. We go to the barber and have haircuts because my hair is who I am. And so we get attached to the body, but the Buddha talks about it actually in kind of the same way that Jesus talked about it when Jesus says, you can't change your stature 1 inch. Well, you can't. Your stature is your stature. You can bend down, but when you raise up, you can only go. And so people put on high heels so that they can change the body. But guess what? The body didn't change. You just put on high heels. And so if we can begin to see that the body is not mine, not me, it's also the one that changes the most slowly. But everybody here can actually understand that what the body was when you were 3 or 5 years old is certainly not the body that you have now. It's gone through enormous changes in that period of time. But those changes were kind of slow. And so we don't much pay attention to the fact that the body is changing. That is until we get old. So the feelings we can also see are just feelings. They're not my feelings, not me. And so our language is structured such that it makes that identification. I feel angry. I am angry. I am frustrated. I am sad. But that's not actually correct. What we can say instead is there is the experience of anger. In other words, the body has adrenaline in it, and we get all pumped up, all worked up. That actually body is the source of the anger, and that the body's chemicals were actually coming out of the mind anyway. The Buddha talks about it in the sense that the mind is the forerunner for everything. You can't get angry in the body without having angry thoughts. So, when we recognize that the body and the feelings are not me, not mine, they're just feelings. That by separating us, you see, when we get confused and think of, I am the one who feels angry, that means that the anger actually is predominant. It's the one that owns us. People are out of control when they're angry. They would do things when they're angry that they wouldn't do if they were logical. So what the Satipatthana is talking about, the direct path, is being able to see those feelings directly. So if we can see those feelings directly, we actually can take control of them so that you are not, in fact, subject to the anger, that the anger is subject to the mind. And you can change your mind fairly easily. So we have the body making slow changes, and then the feeling make kind of slow changes, but things happen really, really fast inside the mind in the sense that we see something and we immediately want to understand it. And so we make up a story to try to fit reality. And the story almost always comes from putting bits and pieces together from our past. So we can begin to understand that our past is actually spotty. It's not complete. We kind of think that we've got a really good memory to where, in fact, most of what happened to us throughout our lives, we weren't paying attention to it, and so it didn't get stored as a memory. And then our memories get all mushed together. In fact, it's quite possible that you can have a dream, know it's a dream today, but 3 weeks or a year from now, that memory is no longer registered as a dream, it's registered as a memory. And so we dream up stuff and make it as part of our reality, of our past. So, if we can understand that memory is not reliable, it's spotty, that we need to keep doing an investigation, then we can come to the point that memory is not only not reliable, it's not really who I am. With that, we can also see that our ability to receive input is not complete. The bees can see things in flowers that we can't see. The dog can smell things that we can't smell. So our input systems are also missing. An example of that would be the bees. If you were given the task of taking the nectar from all of the flowers in a flower patch, it would take you probably days. The flowers would die before you got all the nectar. But the bees can see with ultraviolet so that when a flower has the nectar removed, it changes colors slightly. So the bee can just fly around and see all of the flowers that have already been denectared, to where the human, we have no clue. So, in that regard, we don't have really good sensory input, and yet we rely upon it and make it mine. I see this, I see that, I hear this, I hear that, to where no, it's just sounds, it's just objects, it's just colors, shapes, movement. And if we can disidentify with it, we can actually see better rather than seeing things with a belief system of I can see this and I can see that. So these 5 aggregates then are taught as a preliminary to paticca samuppada, or dependent origination. If we can see these factors, these features that we have as really not me, not mine, then we stop clinging to them. Whatever there is, it's not worth clinging to. Nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine. And when we cling, we almost always are clinging to these 5 aggregates. Now, these 5 aggregates are also part of paticca samuppada. And paticca samuppada, if we learn it in detail, I'm not going to go through the details of it today, but basically it's how the mind works, in the sense that we make up a story and then the story impacts us so that that's how we feel. We respond, we react to our own stories. We don't actually respond to reality. And that's why we have dukkha. So the second one, you could say then, the second noble truth starts in ignorance, brings a lot of ignorance into our memory systems. Then when we make up a story, we bring in ignorance, and that's where we feel, and that's what leads us to the end of the train, would be dukkha. So the cause of dukkha is the ignorance of how we make up our stories that give us the way that we feel. Either I like it, I don't like it, or I'm confused. So if we can see that, that's the whole point, is beginning to see that we create our own dukkha. So that's the second noble truth. The third noble truth is actually that we can come out of that. We can, in fact, see clearly the dukkha and sidestep it. Get out of its way. Don't let it hit you. So let's now look at the the eightfold noble path. Now, the reality is in the suttas, it doesn't ever say it like this, but you can see the evidence in the suttas, especially starting with sutta number 44, where it's mentioned that the Eightfold Noble Path is Sila, Samadhi, Panya. All right, and this is for the beginner. Little children are taught the precepts. The kids in the West are taught rules. Sometimes they even post the 10 Commandments on the schoolhouse grounds. Islam has the Sharia law, and these are designed for people who are too stupid, too unwise to be able to see what's really going on. And so we make these rules up. We make up a morality system to prevent people from harming themselves and other people because they're too stupid to see the harm that they were causing anyway. So once we get the wisdom, once we go through the Sila and then settle the mind down enough so that we can obey the Sila, then that gives us a kind of wisdom, the kind of wisdom of don't go there, don't do that. Now, that wisdom then becomes the starting point for the actual noble path. That the noble path is not Sila Samadhi Panya, but rather it is Panya Samadhi Sila. We wind up in the Sila. How do we wind up in the Sila? Well, if you have the wisdom to see what's going on and you have an organized, unified mind, where you don't want anything, that your feelings are under control, then if you don't want anything, you're unlikely to go kill somebody to get it. You don't have to have thou shalt not kill as a rule. You can just see it as not a good idea. And so this is the distance between the ordinary Eightfold Path and the Noble Eightfold Path. So we can now begin to look at the fact that the place that we start in the Noble Path is by looking, by seeing the dukkha itself, rather than avoiding dukkha because you were told to avoid it. Don't do those things that are harmful. Now we're looking for what's happening inside the mind that creates the dissatisfaction in the first place, so that we don't get what we want because we want stuff. If we didn't want anything, then we wouldn't harm anybody to get it. So, where we start our practice then is to start to practice to see the dissatisfaction that we have in the mind. If we can see the unwholesome thought as a thought, then we can change it. That, as I said before, the mind is the forerunner. The mind is also very fast. But if we're paying attention, if we look directly and see, then we can see that this thought is actually unwholesome. And if I go with it, it's going to take me into an unwholesome state with unwholesome feelings, winding up in unwholesome behavior. So if we can see that, we can change it immediately. Now, the way that the Satipatthana fits into the Eightfold Noble Path is through the practice of Anapanasati. Now, Anapanasati Sutta is based directly upon the four foundations of mindfulness. And so we begin to then pay attention to what the breath is doing. We pay attention to what the body is doing. We pay attention to the sensations and the tensions and the adrenaline and all that stuff in the body, so that we can have the goal in Anapanasati. The fourth step of the body tatrad is to relax the body. And so this is part of the practice is to relax the body. Now, with the feelings, we change the feelings from not liking into a new kind of liking. We're using the Pali word sukha, and the Pali word sukha actually has the feeling of being safe, secure, comfortable, and satisfied. And so we practice sukha, the feelings, but the way that the body feels then is that we can decide how we want to feel. That we don't have to feel according to what we see or what we taste or what we experience with the body. We can actually manage the feelings directly through the mind. So the third item on the Satipatthana, again, is to start paying attention to our attitude. That underlying attitude is what gives rise to the thoughts that we have. But the thoughts we have can also influence the state of mind that we're in. An example of that is that you have two fighters that are fighting in a match, and one of them wins and one loses. So after the game, the thoughts that the winner has are different than the thoughts that the losers have because they've got different attitudes. They both might have the thought of, oh, this is going to be my last fight. But the guy who won it, he has the thought of this is going to be my last fight because I have won and I'm in charge. But the other one who has the thought that this is my last fight would have that thought because he is a victim. And so we can begin to understand that we have winners and losers, and we have winners and losers attitude. Can you begin to change your attitude to that of a winner? Everything is okay. We've got it made. No place to go, nothing to do. Everything is really all right. But we're normally, let us say, under the influence of childhood, to where every child is born as a victim. When you were a tiny baby, you needed a mommy, you needed a tit, you needed all kinds of things. And then when you grew into a child, you were still under mommy's thumb. You were told to do this, told to do that, told to feel this way. You believed the lies that you were told and all kinds of stuff. And so as we grow up in the frame of mind of being a victim. So you're a victim of your feelings, you're a victim of society, you're a victim maybe of some god in the sky, you're a victim of the government, you're a victim of the police. And so we have this attitude of, oh, I need help because I can't do it on my own. I'm a victim. Well, the whole practice of the Eightfold Noble Path then is to begin to change that into the state of sukha, so that we begin to have the attitude of, I can handle this, I can do this. Then, in fact, there's one point in the practice where the Buddha talks about it. The very first noble piece of knowledge that one gains is the knowledge of, no matter how obstructed or how hindered the mind is, no matter, an example is, no matter how angry I get, I can change that. I can come out of it. I can see things the way that they really are. Now, that's an attitude, the attitude of I can do this. The Buddha says that that attitude is noble. It's a factor of the path, but it's an attitude that very few people out in the world actually have. That's an amazing point, because almost everyone feels like they're a victim to their feelings. They're a victim of their attitude, which is actually a victim's attitude. They're a victim of the body. This is why people buy makeup, is because they're a victim to the body. The body can become beautiful, and I'll become beautiful if I paint my face. But really, what's beautiful is the makeup, not the girl. Isn't that interesting? That the girl who is all made up, all you see is the makeup. And this is, in fact, making the girl a victim of the makeup. So if we can change that attitude into, I've got this wired, it doesn't matter what I look like to other people. In fact, a side point is that the monks in the time of the Buddha did not use a mirror. Now, in the old days, mirrors were always a polished piece of copper or some metal, and so it was valuable. But nowadays in Thailand, the monks still practice that, and we don't use mirrors, which I can use. I can say then in this way: you looking at me is all there is. I don't have to look at me. I don't have a mirror. I don't see what I look like. Therefore, I can be happily ugly to you. To me, I don't care because I don't even see it. So, if we can begin to have the attitude of, I'm okay, then we can change that attitude of, I'm not okay because I'm a victim. If we can see that we're not actually a victim, that we can change our attitude about it. So, in order to change our attitude, we can begin by changing our thoughts. We can begin to tell ourselves, wait a minute, you really are okay. You can see reality in the moment. For instance, every one of you here is probably in a room someplace to where you feel safe and comfortable in that room. The room itself is safe, but the feelings about the room are still not unsafe because we're in the habit of being in the attitude of being in danger, to where there's no danger. In fact, the danger, we almost always make it up. But if we can practice feeling safe and secure, if we can practice having the attitude of being a winner, then the body will settle down. It's not got so much adrenaline in it anymore, and it's got a whole lot of dopamine and serotonin and things that help us mentally and physically feel good because of the mind being changed. So we can feel relaxed in the body because we're relaxed in our feelings, because we're relaxed in our attitude with relaxed thought systems. This is the entire teaching of the Buddha. And the Satipatthana is integral to that. That the four foundations of mindfulness means that these four things are what we're going to be paying attention to. So that's the entire teachings of the Buddha. And things like, let us say, insight meditation, vipassana meditation, mindfulness meditations, metta meditations, and all of those kind of practices. Some of them are Hindu, other places like that. That's not the direct path. The direct path is paying attention to the body, the feelings, the mind, and the mind's objects. That's the direct path. So let me finish with that and then go to asking people some questions. Will, you joined us late. Do you have anything to say about what you've heard so far?
You can hear me, right?
Yes.
I don't really have anything to say. I've just been kind of listening so far.
Okay. How about you, Samantha? You've been here. What do you have to say?
No, I don't have anything to say either.
All right. Do you think that you can then practice the Satipatthana according to the Eightfold Noble Path? That you can pay attention to the body, you can pay attention to your feelings, you can pay attention to your attitude, you can pay attention to your thoughts, so that you don't need a four-leaf clover.
Whatever I remember.
Yeah. Well, that's the four foundations of mindfulness, is the four petals on a four-leaf clover. So when you're paying attention to the Satipatthana, guess what? You're lucky.
I love it.
So, Green Sage, do you have anything to say, Alex?
No, I don't have anything to say. I really liked what you had to say, though. I found it I don't know the word accurate, I guess. It was easy to listen, easy listening. It was full of sukha. It was enjoyable.
Good, good. One thing that I didn't mention, which I'll mention now, is that this Satipatthana, this direct path, has to be done over and over and over and over again, that we can actually go from dukkha into sukha. We can go out of our dukkha, but it's going to come back when we're not paying attention. So the whole practice then is a very repetitive practice. We can reach the final goal over and over and over and over again, as opposed to the Western idea of, the getting the goal is very, very hard, but I only have to do it once. It may take me years and years and years to become enlightened, but once I become enlightened, it sticks. There's a much better way of looking at it, and that is that anytime I see what's going on and make a change so that I can feel good right now, that's the goal. But we have to practice it over and over and over again. So,
Dhammarato, I have a
yes,
question.
yes. Mm-hmm.
This is just what I've talked about before, but I was wondering if you could give a little bit more insight onto just watching the mind. I'm always interested on getting that part down pat more, and I'm always a little confused.
All right. We can actually go in reverse order in the sense of if you're angry, that means that you've gone way down into the rabbit hole. But you were slow. You didn't see how you got yourself into that. And so when you're angry, you can then reflect upon, well, how did I get myself angry? And then later in time, when you're in a similar situation, you say, aha, I'm not going to get angry this time. And so we can use events so that we can begin to go backwards. In fact, the Paticca Samuppada that I was mentioning a bit about earlier is almost always taught in forward order, like this is the ignorance that gets us started, and this is how we wind up in dukkha. Well, ordinary people can see the dukkha. In fact, you can go on to the Reddit or to Discord, and you can hear people complaining all the time that they can see their dukkha, but they don't know how to get out of it. All right. And so, having, let us say, insight into the dukkha system that they're in, if we practice the Paticca Samuppada backwards, that means that we can back up earlier and earlier. One important point is what the Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about as wisdom at the point of contact, so that we can then start to manage our feelings. All right, so can you begin to see, oh, well, I'm angry, but I don't have to be angry. I can change my thought pattern from angry thoughts into happy thoughts right now. Here's an example of that. Someone is sitting, let us call it in meditation. They're sitting quietly with their hands folded, their eyes closed, but they're not actually practicing correctly. What they're instead doing is ruminating and remembering an argument that they had with their Aunt Susie. And oh, I'm going to tell her this, and oh, I'm going to tell her that. Oh, I should have thought of this, and I should have thought of that. And so we continue the argument, calling that meditation. But if we can catch ourselves in that argument, then we can say, wait a minute, I can change this upside down to where, wow, Susie is actually a good argumenter. I should go and congratulate her for how good she is at it. Okay, so that's a change that we can make. And then we can become satisfied. Well, I've got an aunt that's the best arguer in town. I'm going to put her in politics or something. Put her on stage. I don't have to argue with her and feel bad myself. I can congratulate her for being a good arguer. And then we can have the thought of, oh, I really do like my Aunt Susie, and I don't have to argue with her. She's okay. And then we can change that thought to, wait a minute, I'm okay too. Even though I lost that argument with her, I'm okay. I can handle that. I can begin to not argue with her. So this is the way then that we can back up from that, oh, I'm going to get her, into changing that into a happy kind of state. But we have to pay attention to the fact that we are having a mental argument. Even though Susie's not here, she's gone home now, she's not around, but I'm still arguing with her in my own mind. And we do that with all kinds of things. For instance, we think about the bank and the bank account. You're not in the bank. Why are you thinking about the bank? So this is the way that we can do it. Whenever we begin to see that our thoughts are almost always of someplace else, some other time, we're ruminating about the past, we're ruminating about the future, can we remember to look to see that, in fact, we're not there? We're here. Can I pay attention to what's happening right here, right now? That's the sati, is to remember to be here now, so that we can see that the mind now is arguing and ruminating, where in fact Susie's not even here. If we can start to do that, we can gain the skill of seeing the more subtle dukkha that we create mentally. And we can change that into the change of feeling good. Well, I'm glad I don't have to argue with Aunt Susie right now. Wow, what a relief it is. Wow, she's gone. Isn't that marvelous? So this is how we practice, by looking at what we're doing, looking at how we're feeling, looking at our attitude. Because if you can't see it, you can't change it. So, Eugene, do you have something to say? You don't see him. Corey, welcome
Hi.
back. Okay, go ahead, Eugene.
No, just this is my first time here, and I'm not too clued up about how to use Discord either. So I'm enjoying the talk, and I'm here listening. I'm in Ecuador.
Yes, this is our first time recorded calls for the live broadcast. So, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
All right. So,
I
Dhamma,
have Dhammarato, I have something to say.
yes, go
Sorry,
right
Doctor.
ahead. Mm-hmm.
So Nishad over here. So how do you identify if a person is a Arihant or the qualities? How can we seek him?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How can we identify if a person is a Arihant, or what are the qualities what we can seek in him?
Mikey, can you help me with what he said?
How can we identify if a person is an arhat or not?
Guess
And
what? You don't have the skills to do that. You can take it in the sense of it takes one to know one. You have to know the right questions to ask and what the answers mean. But more importantly, I would say that ruminating about what is an arahat is actually an unwholesome thought. The better thing to start thinking about is how good you feel right here, right now, rather than someone that's way off there, someplace else. So don't think about arahats. There's too many false arahats around. Then, in fact, if you meet an arahat on the road, kill him. That's an old Zen coin, by the way. All right? Because he's probably lying to you. You didn't say that he was an arahat, he said it. And he probably doesn't know what he's talking about. If he says that he's an arahat, you can guarantee 100% he's not. That's one of the ways of telling an arahat. Arahats don't talk about it. So anybody who claims anything is a liar. And why is he lying? Because he wants you to love him. He needs love. But if you've got the Satipatthana practice correctly, you already got everything you need. You don't even need to love yourself. You're okay already. You don't even need love. The Beatles were wrong when they says all you need is love. All you need is to not need anything. That's what we really need. And so then go.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Sherwan.
Sorry, I had another question. This is related to what I was talking about for looking. I was just writing this down. What do you do when you're trying to investigate your mind, but then your mind tells you you're not investigating good enough?
That's an unwholesome thought. Can you
Oh,
see that? Oh, that's an unwholesome thought. Yeah, I'm investigating just fine. But why? Because I saw you. I saw you, that thought that says I'm not investigating good enough. That's really amazing, isn't it? is that we actually believe those thoughts that we have. Stop believing your thoughts. You are not what you think. Because most of the things that you have been taught to think is a bunch of crap. So we can actually start to intentionally have the thoughts that we want to have, and the thought that you would really like to have is everything's okay. The thoughts that we really like to have would be that I'm okay. I don't have to tell myself, oh, I'm not paying attention. You can say, yeah, I saw that one. I saw the thought of I'm not paying attention. I saw it. I obviously am paying attention. Does that make sense to you, Shawan?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of times when I'm here and I try to investigate, I always do it to get like more work done because I live in America. So everyone's like, you need to make your mind good so you can make more money. And whenever you tie, practice to financial gain or anything, it'll just immediately go out the window. And it's something that's kind of hard to unlearn sometimes.
Well, why don't we then have the thought, oh, if I got my mind together, it really is right now, it's together. My mind is so together, I don't even need that money. I'm okay. Yeah, many societies like the American society are very greedy for money. They think that they're going to feel good when they get money. All right, here's an example. They say that Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, right? Does he look happy to you? So he's got all of this money, but he's still unhappy. He still doesn't have what he wanted. If he, in fact, could feel good, he'd stop wanting to do stuff that harms people. He'd forget about Doge. He'd forget about Trump. He'd go to the beach and enjoy his life. But oh no, rich people are the greediest people. That's why they're rich, is because they're so damn greedy. They're greedy so much that they'll break any law or do anything dangerous. They'll harm anybody that they can harm in order to get more money, because they've been told that money is the only thing that matters. But the reality is that money is not nearly as important as people cracked it up to be. What's really important is your own well-being. And so let's work on that together. Hello, Ivan. You joined us late.
Yeah, I was occupied with something suddenly, so
Yes, Ivan, I want to congratulate you again directly for all the good work that you're doing on the Discord groups.
yeah, it helps with my practice too.
It sure does, doesn't it?
It really does.
All right, who's next? Jonesy Mama, do you have anything to say? Are you out of your shower yet?
Yes, I'm out of the shower. No. Feels like a good talk to come back to. Thank you.
All right.
Hit on a lot of stuff, but so like personally that it's not worth getting into. So excellent on my end. Thank you.
Yes, don't worry, be happy. That, by the way, don't worry, be happy, is the entire teachings of the Buddha in modern language. Can you remember to don't worry about anything? It's only because we worry about something that we would get angry anyway. So if you're not worried, if you're happy, you're not going to get angry. You're not going to get greedy. You're not going to go harm somebody. You're not going to harm yourself. You're okay already the way you are. So, does anybody else have anything to say before we finish? Well, I want to say thank you all for coming. I really am joyful that we have a nice group. 15 on the group right now. So, I hope to see you all soon. Mikey, would you take this home?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to encourage people, whether you're new or old here, go ahead and post in the one-on-one channel here on the Dhamma Friends Discord. Give us a day and time, and we can set up a call with you. We like making new friends here. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the YouTube description to join us here on Discord, and come make some noble friends. Glad to see you all today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you later.